Wow. I don't even know where to begin. This has been quite the journey we've been on as a human family this year. Between the COVID experience that many of us have felt trapped in a level of fear and anxiety and isolated from each other, not able to connect physically, to this whole awareness point around the Black Lives Matter movement, to oppression and the systemic, deep-seated racism and oppression and privilege that has really been with us since really the beginning of North American culture. When we look at all the way back to slavery, when we look all the way back to all the laws made, all the ways in which people have been created in second class, third class, first class citizenship. What a powerful unraveling we're at right now. I mean, we all want love, we all want community, we all want to feel better, essentially at a fundamental level. And yet what's shaking up is the opposite, right? Maybe that's part of our evolution. I'm not really considering myself an expert anymore on anything because it's all changing. I mean, it was never really certain to begin with. You know, life has always been uncertain, but in these times, the call to action for the evolutionary mind has just grown so exponentially that it's something we can't hide from. We can't live in a bubble. You know, I've been living in a bubble my whole life, not even realizing how much of a bubble it was. And I did a project once when I was a kid in school on Malcolm X, and I was so intrigued by this character for his rebellious politics and how he fought and didn't stand down. And yet it was still a novelty to me. It was still my white privilege, so to speak, to be fascinated by this character of a black cultural kind of revolution and awareness point. And yet, you know, in the last while, as I've tried to educate myself, because I realize how, you know, unlearned I am on such matters and how bubblified I am, I realized, holy moly, this stuff is still so in existence to this day. Slavery's just changed forms. We still have such a deep level of oppression. And I don't need to go so deep into that. I guess I'm jumping on here to really touch in with, wow, you know, we are evolving, and we're evolving rapidly right now. And there's a lot of programming, and it's not just that, you know, there's a lot of other programming that needs to be dismantled. You know, one of the stories I had at the beginning of all of this was this idea of, and people call it conspiracy theory, and other people say it's just having a critical mind around matters and seeing the results of old patterns and how they've been kind of trained into our psyche. And yeah, so I bought into that story right away, thinking, well, you know, obviously there's a need for control, then there's a need to create chaos in order to bring more order and control at another level of basically imprisoning people's consciousness in a way that conforms to an agenda. And even that story I found to be something that needed dismantling in my own mind, because that puts blame outside of myself. It puts it outside of ourselves. It puts us in a disempowered place where now we're trying to convince each other of the underlying story. And at a metaphysical level, essentially we're compartmentalizing from the reality. We're not including ourselves as fully integrated holistic beings, and that's the evolution I think that we're being called for. I know that we're being called for, is to get past our own egos a little bit, to stifle growth has been an objective. To have a free mind has been a challenge. We've all found some level of comfortability in a version of our enslavement, so to speak. Now, this is not to say that any one person has we all have a different way of seeing this, but really our minds have been trapped by a virus for a long time. And it's just evolving now. The way it shows up is evolving now. Many people say that they wouldn't treat people as second-class citizens if they lived back in, I don't know, the 1800s, the times of slavery, and yet that's just not true because the virus was so prevalent then in a different form. We've become consumers versus people. We've become fearful of each other because of a potential virus. And yet, you go to all the traditional healing systems, and I've just been madly studying African healing because I understand that I don't know anything about it because it was squashed. It was essentially stifled as a way of preventing culture from growing and empowerment from growing. Using these plants has always been people's medicine. It's always been a piece. But when you go back to that and you see that there are so many different ways to heal viruses. Both Ebola and HIV were worked with by traditional healers in Africa with great success. In fact, a lot of the research was then brought to North America to be proved in a scientific model, and huge results. People with HIV, for example, who lived well into their 40, 30 years, later, they're healthy still. So it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we don't know, and yet our planet is here to help us, to guide us, to steer us in the right direction. So remember to just don't buy into whatever is being put into your mind, even by me, by anybody. What comes through you right now is what is most important. Where the real value of humanity is in connecting to something bigger and allowing ourselves to digest that a little bit and allowing that to move through us instead of regurgitating what comes to us from each other. We live in a collective, and it's important to maintain, I'll call it the collective consciousness grid, which is so important right now because of the awareness platform that is creating it's basically the stage for evolution for humanity. But through that, allow things to digest. This is my understanding anyway. And allow, I'll say spirit, I'll say something bigger than yourself to move through you and give you purpose and inspiration and actionable, tangible ways of dismantling the system that is no longer serving us. The whole idea of police, no police, black, white privilege, virus, no virus, I don't mean to say that those don't matter, but I mean to say that there's a bigger thing that matters here, and it's empowerment of the individual and empowerment of the mind and the heart to connect as a field and voice what's really important. What's really important to you doesn't necessarily mean that's important to me. But if you don't voice it, if you don't have a platform to voice it, if you don't have a place to bring that up, then how is that going to come through? How can that come through? I really hope for the future that we are all able to find our inner voice, find our guides from the other world, from wherever, find flow in our lives so that we can allow this stuff to come out of us and see what resonates, what sticks, what is really valuable, what is actually not just regurgitated information. Where's the creative, imaginal realm in our expression as individuals and as a collective? So yeah, I've heard this sort of saying out there that in some, I don't even remember it entirely, but in some weeks, decades of evolution happen. And I feel like we're there right now. It's kind of exciting. In fact, this is probably the biggest blessing humanity could have asked for, was a bit of time to reflect. So if you're feeling overwhelmed or have anxiety or tension or any of that building up in you, get outside, get into flow, do some forest bathing, do some wild connections. And if you're in a city and that's hard, go to a park and meander slowly and just let it flow through you. Let it digest. Remember you're loved. Remember we're all unconditionally loved by this planet. And if you have a spiritual faith, remember you're loved through that. Okay. I'm taking up enough of your time. Be well. See you soon, friends.